I've known Alessandro Hatami for over a decade. It's been incredible to watch his journey of leaving a mark on the fintech ecosystem. From being one of the original members of the PayPal mafia, so to speak, to his days as a banker at Lloyds Bank, with many other interesting stops in between, which he does mention in this conversation, Alessandro has always been driven by a need to create real impact. Today, he's a major force in the European innovation ecosystem, if you wish. He's working with startups, fintechs, and established banks to shape the future of finance. His deep understanding of both traditional banking and cutting-edge finance, combined with his genuine care for people, makes Hatami an inspiring leader and a key voice in reimagining where our financial services in the modern world are going. Give this a listen, and then, of course, find him online and join him in creating better ecosystems for innovation and financial growth. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Tales from the FinTech Crypt. You heard the amazing introduction, so I won't say any of that ever again. I will just ask Alessandro to say hello and thank him so much for being here. Thank you for accepting my invite.
Thank you, Duana. Great to be here. Good to see you again after quite some time.
We have known each other for, I would say, 15 years now, 14, 15 years now, probably. And we met in exactly the conversation and the situation that I would like you to tell people about, because what our trajectory was like is what you've then lived 100 million other times with other software providers. No secret that you have probably at this point spoken to everyone who is in the fintech industry in the vast majority of at least, I would say, the UK and Europe. Would you say you focus on other markets as well these days?
It starts off. I'm very big in London, in the UK. Obviously, I know my network is very big here, but I've also have a pretty good presence in Europe, and by definition, that leads to engaging with American companies. I've studied in the States, so I have quite a big network there. I've worked for American companies for most of my life. And what's interesting, when I'm seeing, obviously, Asia has going on its own trajectory, but Africa and what is happening in the developing world, I think it's really, really exciting because they're jump starting some of the mistakes that we made in Europe and going directly to find the right solution. So very
global
have a
and
global
everywhere,
footprint.
yes. Yeah. And I think because of that, you get a much better view of exactly that, how the wheel of innovation turns around the world, if you wish, and how some people can leapfrog, just as who was it that was leapfrogging back in the day? Was it the Eastern European countries that were going slightly faster than the UK and the Nordics, even when they finally came to remember those days when Poland was arriving on the banking scene? The big launches of financial digital markets were interesting in those days. So 10, 15 years ago, when the buzz about fintech started, where was Alessandro Hatami at the time? Tell our listeners.
Wow. 15 years ago, where was it? I was just leaving PayPal. So I was leaving GE, sorry, I was leaving GE Capital and I joined PayPal. I was employee 11 in the UK. I started a merchant services activity there,
UK
which was really
PayPal
interesting
mafia,
in understanding some of the skills that, yes, the UK PayPal mafia, which unfortunately I also met the US mafia. So the PayPal mafia is a real thing, guys. Be afraid, be very afraid. But it was very early days, and some of the concepts that today are normal, those days were considered strange. So paying, not having to go to your card or not to get a check or sending cash was edgy, was cool. Right now it's normal. So that was that. So I built the merchant services for the UK. I got to meet some amazing people, including some that are in the news today. So we sold PayPal to Harrods for a while. And I got to meet the CEO there, who was a very unpleasant guy in some situations. And then
must be the only unpleasant CEO you ever met.
Developed that, and we built a team. No, all the others were amazing. They're all amazing. Yeah, everybody was nice. I have a business, Duena. Come on. So after PayPal, I became the CEO of PayPoint.net, which is a payment business, entirely digital. They were doing about 5% of the UK e-commerce at the time, which was interesting. I then did a bit of private equity stuff on my own, not private equity, but venture capital stuff on my own. I tried to acquire a business which is now a multi-billion-dollar platform. We tried to pay 50 million. I think they're worth now 5 billion. So it was it was didn't happen. Let's do it this way. And then I joined Lloyds as the
grandkids will
CEO of
remember
Digital
that
Bank.
bit, right? One of those we all have. Like when I sold my Apple shares.
No, I've done. If Oh, totally. So if I tell you the list of stuff that I've missed, I think you'd be. So I was in Seattle in the 80s and I turned down a job from Microsoft. Okay. Just to start off with that. Um, so going forward, I think I joined Lloyd's, and in Lloyd's I got the other side of the equation, if you want, because I was always on the kind of the challenge the incumbent, and going from the incumbent inside the incumbent was really interesting to see the challenges that they're going through. Interesting enough, they have similar objectives. It's serving the customer, having a product, having longevity, profitability, all these things. But they were doing it in very different ways. So I think understanding the language of both sides led me to kind of leave Lloyd's quite some time ago and set up my own firm, Pacemakers, because I realized that the future of innovation in the financial services is the collaboration between the challenger and the incumbent. And they both know this, but the approaches that they have, the way they engage with each other is very haphazard. So we said, why don't we create a system, an organization that actually operates as the intermediary between the two? And we said that we should be so I split myself into two, if you want. One, we have this business, Pacemakers, who works with large corporates. So we ask the large corporates what they're trying to achieve. We help them map the whole market of all the trends and activities and type of innovation that is affecting that sector. We then give them a long list of all the companies that operate in that sector, from IBM or Accenture at one extreme to the Indian startup with 4 employees. And then we say, and these are the 300 companies or 20 companies, or depending on what segment it is, that are really big. These are the 5 that we think you should be speaking to. And then we hold their hands and engaging and talking and hopefully signing them up. So we've had some good successes, and it's quite a reasonable approach, because if you've realized, a lot of collaboration between challenger and incumbent are happening, but they're not doing it in a professional way. So they're not choosing the best incumbent for that specific scale up. The incumbents are they don't have really a process to do that. They go to a conference and they meet someone, or their friendly investment banker suggested you should speak to these guys, or a big consulting firm says the same thing. And I think understanding the market as a whole is a fundamental thing before you actually make a big decision on that thing. So that's what we do. So that was half of me, and the other half is I mentor startups, I mentor early stage companies, because I find that it's to give something back, if you want.
I know the feeling. We were both. I think we both were startup mentors in Techstars together at one point, or startup bootcamp, one of them, and we had quite a part of the same trajectory, if you wish. And most of the people I talk to have been through the same things. I've not been a banker, but I've been inside the big beast before. I shan't name them. That would be a 10K they'll never send me. But we've all been through kind of understanding that innovation needs a much more intelligent approach than what was happening at the very beginning of financial services, of course, when kind of this gold rush of let's just invent new projects and products for the digital space kind of started happening. And what people are looking at today, and I don't know if our listeners are quite as clear on this or not, is much more intelligently segmented market, if you wish, and a lot more clarity on knowledge. When we started in fintech, there were maybe 2 or 3 reports out there that existed ever. I can count them on one hand, on people talking about digital banking coming. And these days, of course, people are drowning in information. So there's the opposite of that. If when we came in, it was easy to kind of grow with it and understand what's what to a degree, but that's not the possibility for anyone coming in today, where there's the fintech bubble that I still talk about sometimes is still there to a degree, and the good quality products are much harder to get to unless you have a guide such as pacemakers. So in your very amazing journey, what have you found in terms of willingness to be honest with the need for innovation? And that sounds like a theoretical question. It's not. It's a very genuine, hard-hitting question. How easy is it to keep a corporate honest to what they're attempting to do in a mission statement? And how easy is it to keep them going when they accumulate more and more of what I call human debt, which is this organizational debt of miscommunication and people changing and lack of care and so on? So how do you get to the truth of what they really want and keep them honest to wanting it some more?
Very interesting question. I think what is happening is that there's many different realities overlapping. So I think the individuals that you speak to in large organizations are aware that society has changed, are aware that they have to do things differently, that their business model is antiquated and it's not exactly right. But they're also see of themselves as an element, as a component of a bigger organization, and they are remunerated and support and rewarded not for being transformational, but for being sustained and stable. Okay, and that goes against the innovation dimension. And what happens is that you see a lot of these people that were very much against transforming, changing, keeping the things moving on, because they realized that the benefits of this transformation would come after the next pay cycle. Okay, so it is not impossible that they actually will not underperform in the next few months, but then they will perform lately. So what's happening? Nobody's looking at transformational. Everybody's looking at that evolutionary innovation. And I think that would work well if we were able to actually say, okay, the infrastructure of the organizations of today is able to operate in a way that will meet the needs of the future. And that we know that's not the case. So there will have to be a place that you can go beyond the adapting and evolving what you're doing. When you want to transform what you're doing because the market expectations has transformed, a lot of these organizations struggle. So what they do is they try to stick as much as possible to keeping the old core banking system in place, for example, or let's maintain the branch-centric perspective, or let's make sure the app sounds very much like the conversation that we have in the branch. So it's all an evolution. Let's do that instead of thinking, okay, what is it that I'm about as an organization? What is it that I need to deliver? And a lot of organizations think, okay, what I need to deliver is selling these 5, 10, 20, 200 products in a certain way. And that is very much true, obviously, because that's how they're rewarded. But in reality, who are you really serving? And what are the outcomes that you want to deliver? So if I look at banking, for example, we always think about bankers selling loans, selling credit cards, selling overdrafts, selling pension plans, pensions, investments, all these things. These are all products, and they're all treated as separate silos of P&L, etc. In reality, what banks are selling are the ability for the end user to achieve their goals. Okay, and my goals can be as simple as I want to be able to buy that refrigerator, or I want to be able to afford my kids' school when they go to school, or I want to be able to pay my good friend across the other side of the world instantly, etc. Or I want to be able to receive payments from somebody who's far away from me and so on. So ultimately, it's three things. I want to pay, I want to borrow, and I want to protect what I have. And all of this, I want a secure entity in the middle that advises me on it. But banks are doing that, but they're doing it in a very kind of fragmented fashion. So the average bank, I am not Alessandro, but I am Alessandro the card holder, Alessandro the current account holder, Alessandro, and there's different Alessandros that come together in one place. And nobody's thinking what I really, really want. So I think the future will be something that is hyper-personalized financial services.
For someone who wrote emotional banking, we're finally arriving 10 years later.
Well, emotions and data are just, emotion is just one of the variables that I operate on as a human. Okay, so I can be incredibly kind of like a Vulcan on Star Trek, just thinking about exactly what I want and be purely logical about it, or I can be truly emotional about it. But all of these things represent me. I am not different beings. I'm one being. So my behavior, my rational and emotional behavior are driven by data all the same. Okay. So, and driven by my past behavior and so on. So in a funny sort of way, even AI that doesn't have any emotions could look at my past behaviors and predict what I'm doing there, embedding in that the emotional dimension, not just the logical. So a bank could understand exactly what is going to make Alessandro happy, and if I'm happy, I will remain with the bank and I will continue working with them, and I am retained, because that is a fundamental benefits that banks are realizing. The biggest value add that we have for a bank is our retention. So keeping us in place is the most valuable thing. And the startups coming in and taking us the slice of the more profitable people with products that are more cool are actually diminishing the banks, not by creating alternative revenue streams, but by making us less um, trusting of the bank and remaining with the bank. In the past, I opened a banking account with the bank, I stayed there for the rest of my life. Today is no longer the case, and the
Right.
banks have
But
missed
think,
out on that.
sorry.
So going back to
Carry
that,
on. No. It's
yeah,
just when we
go ahead.
get,
Sorry.
I could clean this, but it wouldn't flow as well. We are just getting very passionate about it because I really wanted to hear in that how much has that changed? Because when I left fintech, quote unquote, when I took a break from fintech, banks were finally starting to get terrified about this reality that they will use market share. Are they still terrified, or what I've heard from some bankers these days was that was a false alarm. Nothing much happened.
Yeah. Well, it's not true that nothing much happened, because what they ask them, were you banking, are you selling the same way that you were doing before? And the answer is obviously not. Okay. So what happened is that they adopted some of the changes on that. And what happens is, like, what can I say? If you asked Sears Roebuck in the States right after the dot-com crash, did dot-com succeed in taking your business away? They would say, no, we won the battle, etc. There's no Sears anymore, but Amazon dominates the market. Okay. So what's happening right now is that we are still in that evolution. The evolution is not a straight line, it ups and downs, but the trend is in that direction. Okay, so banking as we want it, it may not be the vision that Revolut has, but it's not the vision that a I don't know, my old home Lloyds had 10 years ago. Okay, so they both are going into different direction. Uh, the evolution of banking is dependent on making satisfying me, the customer, satisfying you, the customer, to remain with products that are all the good things. Either what I want, they're viable, they're reliable, they are safe, they're secure, etc., etc. And in order to do this, there will always be competition, thinking, bringing new things to the market, and I will have to, as a player, adapt to that. At one point, though, these things could be very new, so new that are against my structure and the way I'm organized. So I have to rethink myself. So we mentioned before that the banks are thinking themselves as product silos, and they still do. And there's a top guy that is responsible, or there's a woman who's responsible for mortgages, and she's very important because she generates this much profit for the company. If somebody went to that and said, okay, you know what, you mortgage person, you credit card person, you current account person are no longer relevant. You're serving a segment person that goes across all of them. And this person has the P&L, you guys are just service providers. It requires a transformation of the organization, which many organizations intellectually may say, yes, that makes sense. But in reality, saying, how am I getting my bonus next
Right.
year? Okay.
So
Uh,
it's this. Would you
and they
say
don't.
that this has improved much over the last years, or it has gone backwards? And the reason I'm not trying to point fingers. I don't actually know the actual real answers to this. But what I have seen is that the way that banks look at the two variables that I think are making this harder, which are one of them, this human that I've talked about, and the other one is practically the tech debt that has resulted from the human debt. There are only two kinds that we could wrap up, and then we would be in a better position. I feel like banks are looking at these two elements in a much less intense way than other industries, to put it very elegantly, in the sense that if you have this conversation about what is your genuine purpose, sit down, throw everything out and ask your whys with your team, and then start from tabula rasa, you get different answers in logistics, in pharma, in places where it mattered that they moved fast because the industry was much faster around them than I got in banking. Do you see them kind of do you see the same delimitation, and do you think that that's gotten slightly better over the last 10 years?
I think that right now there is no leader of a bank that doesn't realize that their future is digital. Okay, that is a known fact. Okay, it's just a question of how to get there. Okay, just a question of trajectory. It's not a question of destination. Destination is that. Okay. Now, in that purpose, there will be people that will make decisions that will be right, and some people will make decisions that will be wrong. So the future of financial services will have three players in them. There will be some incumbents, there'll be some challengers, and there'll be some that are not there yet. Okay, some completely new ones that we don't know. That is no doubt about that. Will the banks be wiped out in 20 years' time? No. Will they be like today? No. Okay. Will fintech dominate the banking world? Absolutely. Will they be run by startups? No. Okay. There will be a combination of things. So what we see is that it's an industry that has changed. So remember, the financial services is the ideal digital industry because there's no real physical goods being changing hands, really. So music and financial services are the ideal digital businesses. So what we really think about right now is what does the future look like? What does the Spotify of banking look like? Okay, and I'm not sure that it looks like a fintech. I don't know. I don't think it looks like an incumbent bank, but it looks at something different. And will it be built by one of these two? I think so, but it's possible that it's not. That somebody else comes in. So I think we're in the middle of this road. The road is not finished. There's no real destination, and there's no real destination for anything we do in life. You never get to a point. You get to the next peak, and then there's another one next right afterwards that you have to go for. So at some point, let the banks enjoy the peak they're on right now, because there's a reduction in funding in fintechs that they seem to think that they have it all. Give it a few months.
Is this driven? You think about, when we were doing this 15 years ago, there was a very almost as often as we would hear the phrase about the amount of toothbrushes, we would also hear the fact that it doesn't really matter who you have in the board in banks these days, because that's the old guard. That's two bonuses away from retirement, after which we're going to kind of have this inflection of new blood that will completely change. And I think, to my mind, and what I've observed, and I want your opinion on that, that was naive, because obviously once you inject new people in an organization that already has human debt and tech debt, it will come to the same place, in a sense. So non-generative organizations don't overnight transform because you've gotten some new blood in. Are those boards the same, or have the boards changed and entirely like we were hoping back then?
The boards are changing, and I think I was on a board of a bank until a few months ago. The mindset, and it's always a combination. I was the more digital guy there until I left, and I'm not a young guy. Okay, so I'm not a fintech start guy. Thank you. You're very kind. So I think what's happening right now, I think we'll see more and more the emergence in people in banks, in boards that are kind of like me. So you don't want to really bring a completely disruptive individual in the bank, because that will not generate good dialogue between the bank. And you don't want to bring somebody who is the representative of the past. Okay, you would like to bring somebody that is a bridge. And I think I see myself as a bridge. I think you're a bridge also, because you've seen the past, you see the future. And I think you know how to speak to a startup, you know how to speak to a scale up and so on. You can see some of the trends and some of the stereotypes, or the kind of, what's the right word? These resistance or reluctance to transformation that is there, but you can also see the opportunity and potential of change. Now, sometimes if you're a very digital individual, the way you express this to the incumbent is very dramatic. You say it's obvious that this is the right answer. Okay. Instead, you need somebody like us that actually comes in and explains, says, okay, look, you're trying to do this. These guys are doing that. This is the benefit that you get by working with each other. You could do this with that. So helping see the future in terms of the past and seeing the past in the terms of the future, I think is what we do. We are translators, for lack of a better word. I use the word bridge. Translator could be a better one even. So translating
I
bridge,
really
another one.
appreciate the
So I think what we see in boards is that we'll see more people that have operated along
I
both sides
appreciate the
of
kind
the division.
inclusion. I don't feel like I am the elegant bridge that anyone would say that I could ever be, because unfortunately I've been over my lifetime I've been way too disruptive to way too many places. So, but with that said, I know exactly what you mean. I remember looking up to yourself when I met you and many other of the people that were at that time bankers and thinking what these amazing people have, Roberta as well, Michel Panowitz, God, that's a blast from the past. I forgot he existed until right now, bless him. But all these people that have built banking at the time and that were inside, to my mind, were going through a lot harder of challenges than I ever would have done, because surviving internal politics, which is something I found out in the belly of the beast later on, is intensely hard, and trying to make that change from the inside. We don't say this enough on all these podcasts. We seem to be talking to the outside people and to the industry and to FinTech. But what realistically, there
Yeah.
are hundreds of thousands of people that are inside organizations who would understand the scope of change. They could potentially be the president of the world and make that change overnight if that were the case, but they are stuck in positions where it's almost impossible to much affect transformation.
Well, you're totally right. Well, I had a gimmick that I used to use that was very helpful in trying to be the promoter of change. So at the beginning of the year, we would speak to all the players in the organizations outside the digital division, and we try to get all these projects in. We would price them, prioritize them, look at the return that they would generate, and go back to the board and say, we're going to invest the 150 million that we were investing. And over 5 years, the return is going to be this much. Our target is 350% return. Okay. And next year is going to be 322 based on the forecast that we have with these projects. So very much focusing on return. What we did there was several things. One is that we looked at every digital project and we assessed boundaries for it and very direct objectives. These objectives was then bought in by the company, by the parts of the organization that were receiving it. So digital was paying for the transformation, but then let's say credit cards benefited from that transformation. In order to get that, they would have to guarantee that they would have to forecast a return that this new proposition would do, and that will be built into their numbers. Okay, so that would say we are supporting digital to build this credit card capability, and they will generate 3% more sales, and we put that in our numbers. Okay, so they were committed in supporting us. They were also committed in in making sure that the rest of the organization knew that this benefit was coming because they had generated a lot of things. We had this roadmap of things that we were delivering, and we have faced three different things when you build something new. You have the supporters, which are these people I mentioned to you. Then you have the gatekeepers, the neutral ones, the legal or compliance, etc., that can be swayed either way, supporting or not supporting. And having somebody with the big P&L that is interested in you succeeding is the way that you actually achieve this in a big organization. So you have to be able to have this champion supporting you. And then the third, you have the people who don't want you to do it, who see threatened by what you're doing. And again, having a big P&L holder that supports you is really helpful. So having this ROI, yes, the thing is they have good intentions. They're not evil, but they're saying, okay, how is this going to impact the future? I have a vision of, sometimes they have a vision issue. Sometimes they're thinking that this is going to diminish their role and so on and so forth. So a variety of things. So having an ROI focus from the beginning is the best way to clean up, because you're translating something that is complex into something that is understandable. Okay. And also what's interesting is that you also avoid disruption, because when you have a portfolio, say I have these 22 propositions and generating 375% return over 5 years. If somebody comes in and says, build this other thing for me, you have to do this and that, you say, sure, fine. How much is the ROI? I don't care about the ROI. Okay, so zero. Let's go to the board and explain why we have to do this zero ROI thing and not do this other one that had whatever ROI you want. And interestingly enough, projects all became ROI centric. We were the innovation, the digital team became an important component because that benefit generated also was ours. So we could say we are generating value right away. So it wasn't a neutral, we got to do this because we got to do this. We got to do this because it generates benefit. And I think bringing down a complex product into something simple like ROI, etc., is a really good way of getting your job
I
done
love that
internally.
piece of advice. Let's just get clear ROI and ensure that the person whose P&L burns the most is invested. I think that's a really good takeaway for anyone listening, because it's not as evident as that, both internally and externally, that those things are important. And I think we like to ignore politics, we like to ignore human debt, we like to think it's not happening, but realistically, unless you kind of understand both these levers of numbers that make a difference to someone's position, you're not going to get anywhere in any of this. So that's really great advice.
Yeah, no, because companies are ultimately there to do that. Now, the ROI is obviously super simplistic. It's not the only way of doing this. So as a manager of a portfolio, you want to have things in there also that if you are able to get ROI guaranteed for a portfolio, you're able to squeeze things in there that have a lower ROI that allow you to build for the future. Okay, so if I have to create an AI engine to be able to drive my future, I'll pay for this by creating a credit card onboarding system that is cheaper. Okay, so you become a bit of the owner of the process if you have this ROI, because once you can guarantee a return for the banks or large organizations, they treat you with detachment and support. And I say, okay, they know what they're doing. Yes, I don't understand exactly what's going on, but they've delivered numbers in the past. They'll deliver numbers again. So I think that's an important thing.
I like that framing a lot.
To
Even
keep in mind.
as a maker of software, we had to come down from our very big social ambitions of everyone at work should be doing work on their emotions to how do we show that directly in the bottom line. And unfortunately, that's a very quick connection for most companies, and a very complicated one to understand, but a very quick one to show on paper when people have to be productive and engaged. Otherwise, they won't be making you technology. But it took me a long while to understand that. And I think the fact that you're translating that to the two parties and you do that through your role is kind of where the magic of what you're doing stands. When you look at the market today versus the market, I don't know, before the big changes of open banking, before kind of we started doing digital money, I think those were probably seminal, just as AI is going to now probably make big change. Do you think that the amount of valuable proposition is more solid and greater today? And I think is there more confidence in these propositions these days than there was ages ago, or has that not necessarily went that way?
I think what happened when you lived in something for so long, you look backwards and you look at it with rosy eyes. Okay, it wasn't rosy lenses. It wasn't that great in the past. So nobody believed that mobile was going to be bigger than branch. Okay, when that happened, it was a kind of let's do this. Okay, you put something on the mobile phone. What? You want to do an app for banking? Are you crazy? How many apps are we going to have? A super app? All this stuff disappeared. So I think what we're seeing right now, there's an evolution of innovation that is coming our way. Everybody's skeptical about it. One is the AI innovation that we talk about. Right now we're going through a super hype of AI, so it's going to crash at some point, and then it's going to grow in a very reasonable way. Because AI is overpromised. A lot of people that don't know what they're talking about are selling it, and I think sorry, more people that don't know what they're talking about are buying
that's even worse. Yeah, that's
worse.
A good point. Yeah, but
okay. So I think another area that we need to think about is the whole crypto space. I think if a CBDC is created, a digital euro or a digital dollar is created, or a Bitcoin is created, it would transform payments in a way that is incredibly profound. And all the stuff they tell you, well, they're not secure, your privacy is gone. So what is your privacy when you use a PayPal? Is there any privacy there? So Digital payments already have no privacy, so crypto will have no privacy all the same. So I think the future, some of the trends that we're seeing are those. Um, the challenges we have is going to be regulatory, frankly, because that's where we're hitting the barriers, and that we're really realizing that regulation is inadequate and the capabilities of some of the new capability propositions that we're putting in place. Crypto will have no value if it's not regulated. AI is incredibly dangerous if it's not regulated. These are the two trends in my mind that we're seeing coming forward. The adoption of digital is not slowing down. In fact, it's accelerating. Financial services are getting increasingly embedded everywhere. Open banking is something that is getting increasingly demanded, regulated, and supervised. Cybersecurity is going to be a huge problem because as we go digital, also people trying to attack it will be there. That's not going to go away. It's not going to be
Not a fact.
destroying the business, but it definitely can create. And I wouldn't be, I hope it doesn't happen, but I wouldn't be surprised if some catastrophic failure somewhere because of cyber, because we are being a bit, we could be a bit more scared than what we are these days. And ultimately, I think the big change is going to be the right regulation. The right regulation will change the industry. It's like with the automobile, when there was no regulation, when there's extreme regulation, when you had a car, you had a guy with a red flag that went in front. That wasn't going to transform the world of transportation. Is the stop sign and the speed limits and the people giving you tickets for parking in the wrong place that did. So the same will have to happen for innovation and financial services.
Let me ask you an almost differently formulated question. As someone who's been looking at how the regulator played into the financial services for the last 15 years, I was super hopeful for a while because some of the things that the regulator were underlining were not being touched by some banks. So some of the innovation I've seen internally, in particular looking at their processes, looking at their people, looking at the back end, has been sometimes driven by a fear of the regulator asking for those things. With that said, just very recently, I've conducted a campaign with my team on the recommendations regarding psychological safety for employees in technology and banking that the regulator has put in place. And to my shock, the industry, let me put it elegantly, has found ways to go around that regulation and not respond to the spirit of it. So now the question I have, in the sense of shockingly, no one has fallen over backwards to go by the spirit of it and change the way people feel internally and then make sure that's happening. So the fear or the question I have is this a founded fear that there will be that the regulator cannot even be a catalyst for innovation if people don't quite respond to what it's trying to achieve?
I think the reason why that regulation was not followed is that there was no repercussion if you didn't. Okay. So that wasn't because regulation was too strict. Regulation wasn't strict enough, wasn't clear enough of what that is. Okay. So if you think about why is GDPR being followed, is because there's a repercussion if you don't. Okay. And what has that achieved? That has changed the way we look at our data, look at who we are, and so on. Is that a bad thing? Yes, we're all annoyed about saying, "Oh, another cookie thing," but then you realize that, whoa, all these guys are stealing who I am, and they know more about me. So I say no, no, no every time, right? So it changes. So I think the regulation you described, if it didn't have any repercussion for the people who are breaking it, that's not regulation. That's just words that are being shared. Ultimately, regulation has to have a purpose, and it has to have a structure, and it has to be enforceable. So if it's not enforceable, or it can be doubtful if it's enforced, etc. If there's any ambiguity,
there's no regulation until the compliance department is afraid of it. Right.
The CEO is afraid of it.
And CEOs being afraid is an interesting topic, I think. I write a lot about and think a lot about the element of fear when it comes to people looking at new things. Obviously, it's there and something that the most visionaries are able to push through. But the capability of doing that in a bad economy, or the capability of doing that when you have investors and shareholders breathing down your neck is not exactly an easy thing to do. We all know that, yeah. But with that said, and hard as it is, the the ability of people to be a lot more real and vulnerable and honest and raw. Do you see, like I see, that has changed even internally in places?
Interesting. I think there's a more awareness in large organizations that the state of the employees are not just a cog in a big machinery, they are a component, a very important component. And I think if you look at what a company is, the company is a coming together of infrastructure, regulation, capital, but also people. Okay. And I think until recently, so in our generation, the previous generations, I think there was an unspoken rule between the company and the employee that the company was going to take care of the employee. And the employee was, yes, you're going to put up with some shit, but then you have a long-term job. They're going to be there for you. You join this company, you stay for 50 years, and then at the end you get a thank you, a pension, and a gold watch. Okay, that is now gone because companies are saying, okay, when the staff is gone, when I don't need this thing, I'm going to let them go. I'll give them a severance, but smaller as possible, etc., etc. So right now, when this happens, we realize that the outcome of that is that the younger generations that come after us are realizing that if their parents got laid off because these companies are not going to take care of them, I could be laid off too. So why am I working? Okay, so I'm working because I love this company, because it pays me, because it's teaching me something and it's making me more valuable. So ultimately, what companies are becoming, they're becoming platforms for their employees. They're becoming Ubers for the employees. So the employee wants to have a certain things guaranteed. So it's funny when you hear these old employers talking about, oh, people now, they think about quality of life. They think about all these other things that we never thought about. They should be feeling and doing the job. Well, what are you giving them in exchange except salary? So you're not giving them security. You're not giving them training. You're not giving all of that. So all of this has to happen. So employers today are realizing, or CEOs are realizing that one big challenge I have is retention. And retention is not just based on salary. It's based on a variety of other things. So understanding what your team needs and what your team wants is a big component for you to be able to preact on situations where it forces you losing the right talent to somebody else. Okay, so I think regulation is important because of the protection of people who are vulnerable, especially in manufacturing in different countries. I think you see that a lot, but you see it also in service organizations in the West. But ultimately, the composition of the elements that of a CEO is looking at include the profitability and the sustainability of the product, include the product market fit, obviously the vision that we have there, the investors and how the investors are perceiving, but also the employees. And also this, because of the digital world, this is now completely transparent. Okay, it's not like 20 years ago that you didn't know what was happening inside a big corporation. Right now, everything's open, everything's clear. So if there's an abuse, if there's a mistreatment, if there's a wrong behavior, eventually it will emerge. So CEOs have to realize that the well-being of their employees is not a nice to have, but is a need
I like
to have.
that hopeful message. I think there's obviously a lot.
But let me also say something. The CEOs want to do this, by the way. This is not, you're not being forced. Okay, no CEO wants to run a company where everybody is unhappy or uncomfortable. They want to do this, but the thing is, we'd have to provide them with the means. You have to provide them with an incentive. Where you have to create a whole thing. So organizations that help them do better and actually engaging, interacting, reacting to their employees' needs, I think would be very valuable in the future.
Question what kind of an organization they are?
All the time.
In earnest, not on
All the
paper.
time. Especially, and you think it's the, I think it's the CEOs that are thinking about it. Yeah, we're thinking about doing it, but I think it's every employee. When I'm a new hire and I go and I realize that my firm is not doing something ethical, I'm not happy. Okay. Yes, I want to be paid. Yes, I can tell myself, oh, I'm getting paid. I don't really care that these guys are abusing the manufacturing people in developing world, etc. But I'm not happy. If I get a job that does the same things and it doesn't do that, I'll change. Okay, so it goes across the organization, and we are underestimating the impact of that.
Focusing on the humans and the individual perspective, that the response to whatever we're attempting to put on the market is obviously something that thankfully boards are looking at these days. In terms of for them to get from A to
Yes.
Z and feel like any incumbent or any of the big corporates you're working with has completed a transformational cycle, what would you say are the steps for them to start now and end where they want to be? What are the stages, if you wish, they should go through?
Okay, I think like with any journey, you want to decide a destination. And you also with the recognition that this destination is probably going to be an intermediate destination, there will be others going forward. So you want to say, okay, what is it that I want to achieve? Is it internal rating scores, scores from outside, my own feeling as a CEO that I'm doing the right thing? You know, what are the metrics that I want to achieve? Then go and analyze my existing situation and see how I stand, rate myself, measure myself, etc. And then based on what I get from feedback, create a whole series of situations where I can actually improve on those scores. So I'm an engineer by training, okay? So I see things in very pragmatic, if A, then B kind of thing. So you have to think about the end design of what you're achieving. You have to put together where are you standing, where are you right now, okay? And then you define the steps to get you from where you are to your destination in intermediate steps. Organizations that help me understand where I am right now are very important. And also organizations that allow me to put together a pathway or a design to get me to that endpoint that I want to get to are important. And the endpoint is not necessarily a beautiful structure, it's also a perception in the market. It's a turnover number. It's a combination of variety of variables that were in there. And to go from there, from where we are to that, is something that companies should really be looking forward for help.
I think we should
helping them
absolutely remind people that they should talk to you. This was not an infomercial, but I think just by you guys hearing what incredible tapestry of a journey that Alessandro has had, you realize that he's set on a lot of knowledge. And if there's anyone that can kind of help through a genuine innovation and transformation journey, that would be Alessandro. So get in contact. I'll make sure that I get all of your data in the podcast. And obviously, I'd like to get you back because there's a lot more that we got to dig into. I love how we left it on they are doing the right things, but we should question that once or twice more. So I'd love to have you back on the podcast. Thank you so much for coming over today and giving us a glimpse of the beginnings of it all. And let's hope that by the time we talk again, we'll have such amazing news about the market. And thank you again, Alessandro, for your presence today. Same here.
Thank you, Duane. It was a pleasure to be here.